Said on some number of days before the day of the incident?
At least several weeks before.
Okay.
But not only that, I mean, he had been assembling these bombs for a year, and he had been collecting weapons for several years.
Okay.
So this plan was in his head, and what I believe is that the arrest for the gun at school, him getting expelled, was not part of his plan. And it simply meant that suddenly, instead of waiting for another few weeks when he intended to do it by putting bombs, as he described to friends, he said, I'm going to put bombs under the bleachers at a pep rally and lock the doors of the cafeteria with a chain and then start shooting people when they try to escape. I mean, he had this whole plan. And he told people, they didn't tell anybody, authorities, they just thought he's kidding. But that was his plan. And when he got arrested, suddenly his parents are going to take away his guns. His father threatened this.
Okay.
So he had to move quickly. So his parents were now in the way. So what can he do? He really wants to do this shooting. Get rid of the parents.
All right. So you get interested in this particular event, and then you begin looking at prior school shootings, and you talk about Charles Whitman, who goes back to 1966. I do happen to remember that an autopsy was done on him, and they found a tumor the size of a fist in his head.
Well, I think a walnut. What they said was a walnut. And he asked for that autopsy to be done. And in his goodbye suicide note, he said, I hope you'll do this autopsy because I know I'm not right in the head and something's going on in there, and maybe you'll find something. So he asked for that.
Okay. Did you then go back and study school shootings? Were they all in the United States? Were they throughout other countries? Give us a sense of your laboratory here.
Well, the surprising thing is, after Whitman, the next school shooting was 1974, so we're going another decade now. And that was Anthony Barbera in Orleans, New York, in the northern part of New York. And he was another sniper, but he went into his school at the Christmas vacation. So it was just before New Year's, and he went up, killed a custodian who was in the school, kind of in his way, and started shooting out the window, sniper style, as Whitman had done. So he was copying that. Now, 5 months later, in Canada, in Ontario province, was the first real school shooting, and when I say real, I mean the classic student goes in a classroom at the school and starts shooting other students and teachers.
Okay.
And that happened in Canada. 5 months later, the second such shooting occurred in Ontario, again, in Canada. So the first two real classic school shootings were in Canada, a country that we consider much safer and much less gun crazy than the U.S.
All right. But in your recent book, School Shootings, how many cases do you look at? How many shootings do you look at?
As I say, about 200.
All right.
Yeah.
And are they limited to the United States and Canada?
Not at all, no.
All right.
Now, what happened is that because this phenomenon became such a big deal in the United States, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, middle 90s, at that point, as we know, American culture, McDonald's or hairstyles or clothing is copied all over the world because of our movies, our TV shows, things that are exported, and people pick up on that and they think it's cool. Same thing happened with school shootings. The first country to really pick up on it was Germany. There's been more school shootings in Germany than any other foreign country. And most recently, Finland had its second school shooting.
Right.
So there's a number of places, but then, okay, what about places where they don't have guns? The population at large, doesn't have guns. Well, how about China and Japan? And having lived in Japan, I know a lot of incidents occurred at schools, both with students attacking others and with adults attacking the schools using knives or other sharp weapons. So the same thing happens, the same mindset, the same type of person, but they don't have guns, so usually they don't do quite as much damage.
Okay. So, has the demographic changed in other ways besides there being ethnic minorities? I'm going to assume they're still pretty much almost exclusively male. Is that about right?
Yeah, 98% male.
All right. And are there, the traditional description is a loner, a misfit, somebody who hasn't gotten along well. Is that pretty much the case? It
was until we get to Stephen Kazmierczak a year ago in Valentine's Day, 2008. He had a girlfriend. He was very popular among other students. He was a graduate student. He had everything going for him. All the professors thought he was extraordinary. And what happened there? It just didn't fit the pattern.
Okay. But over the broad range of shooters, is it still pretty much males who tend to fit that loner, isolated image?
It's males who tend to get into their own isolation by, for example, being obsessed with video games. And if you're into the computer that much during a day, you're not socializing.
Right.
So you get into your own world, and they begin to see themselves as the hero of their own video game.
Okay. This is a fascinating topic, and we only have about 4 minutes left. So I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how can these shootings be prevented. We know a little bit about who the shooters are. We know it's happened around the world, primarily in this country, however. How can these shootings be prevented?
The way they are being prevented now is several things. First of all, they're looking at what we know from past school shooters as far as they give away signs. A lot of them don't want to go through with it, and so they do things which are giveaways. For example, violent essays, or they talk to people about it. Almost every school shooter, high school and below, has told a friend. I'd say everyone has, actually. It's only when you get to the college level that they're not going to be telling a friend. And at the college level, though, you will see signs like Seung-Hui Cho, who wrote a lot of violent essays and plays. So this isolating themselves, I mean, the teachers were very upset. They noticed it. Now, since Virginia Tech, there's been a lot of colleges have put things into place to investigate these things and try to find out what's really going on without kind of squelching anybody's individualism or freedom of expression. So there's that going on. There's also things like what's happening at Sheldon High, among many other schools, where there's monthly drills, intruder alert drills, gun on campus drill, so that people practice what would we do if this sort of a thing happened.
Okay. Are those the primary methods of defense?
Well, the other one is there's now a national 1-800 number, which is in the book, which is for people to call who've learned the fact that you don't just joke, say it's a joke or that person can't be serious. You hear something, you report it. And students are the first line of defense because they're the ones who are listening to each other. They're the ones that are going to be able to tell, it may not be anything really serious, but this is what I heard, let's look into it.
Illness or warped values, and the availability of guns. So it can happen pretty much anywhere, can it?
It absolutely could happen anywhere, but I list in the book more like 10 factors which have been, they come up frequently regarding school shooters. And if there's just one thing, like somebody's obsessed with video games, that doesn't mean that person's going to be a shooter. But if you combine that with, let's say, violent writings, and the person has the access to guns, and they've been looking at a lot of websites which are about school shootings, you've got a few red flags here.
Okay. Well, folks are going to have to read the book to get to the rest of those 10 factors. Our guest has been Joe Lieberman. You've been watching To Pursue the Truth. My name is Ed Monks. Thanks for tuning in, and good night.